Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the soundbites. We're continuing with our candidate interviews, and joining me this evening is Anya Tynio, who is running for Congress, and that's a big step. Anya, very nice to meet you. And thanks.
Thank you for having me.
You're
appreciate
welcome. So, big step for you.
Yes.
This is great. And I know you've been around a lot. Could you introduce yourself to the viewers and tell them a little bit about your background? And
yes. My name is Anya Tynio. I am from the Northeast Kingdom. I am running for Peter Welch's seat for the U.S. House of Representatives to Washington, Vermont's only representative seat.
That's great. And a little bit in your background? Just,
well, typical of the area, I suppose. Right. I grew up farming. My first job right out of high school was managing a dairy farm. I currently work in advertising, and my job is to drive around and talk to businesses all day long.
Oh, great.
So I talk to a lot of business owners, I talk to a lot of people, and I listen to what they have to say about the economy and the condition of the state and where we're headed as a state, and I think that that has benefited me greatly in running for office.
That's great. What made you make that decision? That's quite, because have you held any elected offices before?
This is my first time running for elected office. I considered running 2 years ago, and ultimately it wasn't the right time, but I felt that this year was, so I decided to jump right in.
So, you know, Vermont's famous for keep re-electing its incumbents.
Yes.
What are you bringing to the table that people will pay attention and vote for you instead of Congressman Welch?
I have several things that differentiate me from Peter Welch. The first one is that I have been working class. I understand the working class. I've been in agriculture. I understand what the economy is lacking for the state of Vermont, and I will work very hard to improve that economy. I bring a unique perspective from the working class, and if I were to be sent to Washington, I believe that that kind of inside knowledge would benefit me greatly when working towards economic improvement in the state.
Working at a farm these days, that's quite the training ground, because farmers work so hard, and
they do.
And it's up
some
and
of the
down.
Hardest working
well,
people I've
it is,
ever met.
and it's always up and down, and right now it's a little down.
It has been down for quite a few years, actually. The reason I wound up having to leave farming was due to the downcline.
Right.
You know, it's just unfortunate that that happened, but it led me in this direction. So I suppose everything happens for a reason.
Well, that's good. It works out. I give you a lot of credit for running. Oh, so, when you compare yourself to Peter Welch, and I think most of us here know him fairly well, what would be the differences between your styles or the way you would approach an issue?
Well, the first thing I will say is that I am very conservative. I understand that that's probably not a popular position with everyone in the state of Vermont, but I am a conservative, where Peter Welch is more liberal. I do support the Second Amendment. I am pro-Constitution in every way. Constitutional rights are very integral to my campaign. It's very important to me that we maintain those freedoms. It's a timeless document, really, and it was meant to guide us in governing, and it's important to maintain those standards, if you will. That being said, if I was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, I would be the only woman that Vermont has ever sent to Washington.
Excellent.
So I definitely, that would be an honor for me to do that. That isn't why I'm running. I ran before I even really fully saw that or understood that, but I definitely would do my best to fill that position with honor and integrity and do a great job, as the men before me have done.
Yes, yeah, that's great. We've been very fortunate for the people that we have sent to Washington, and I just think we could certainly talk about term limits. I do think that's important to consider.
It is an important thing to consider when you're talking about term limits. At some point you have to ask yourself, what is too long? And there is the point that being there and learning the job and having enough time there to really understand all the workings and be effective is important. But at some point when you're getting into double decades,
Yeah, right.
you really have to ask yourself
Right.
where that's going.
Because I don't
and
think
how
you can
that
help
is.
it. You get sucked up into what's going on in
yes.
the Congress here in Vermont, in the State House. So you just can't help it. You go in thinking, I'm going to be independent, but over time, it just happens. And I don't think it's intentional. It's just the way it goes.
I think that's true. I think that eventually, you know, you build strong relationships with people and so forth, et cetera, and it goes from there. But I do think that there is a length of time that you can be there without that happening.
I think so too. So on your campaign brochures and stuff, you focused, I think I got this right, but the Second Amendment, our economy, agriculture, and then the military, veterans, and law enforcement.
Yes.
Could you tell me why these issues in particular are important to you?
Well, definitely the economy and agriculture are important to me just because, as I said, I'm working class. I grew up in agriculture. I love farming. I really did enjoy it when I did it, and I intend to raise my kids that way at some point.
Great.
When I do have them. I don't have kids yet. But that being said, as far as military and law enforcement and veterans go, our military is what keeps us free. You know, we owe our military a great debt of gratitude for putting their lives on the line for ours. I don't think that anybody would dispute that with me, and as well as our veterans, all of that. I have military in my family, and I also have law enforcement in my family, and so I understand the unique struggles that they go through. With law enforcement, it's important that we let them know that we are not going to throw them under the bus, so to speak. I've said that before, but if something goes wrong, we will make an effort to look at their side of it and not just say, well, we had nothing to do with this, it was all them, they did something wrong, without carefully looking into it. It's important for us to support law enforcement. We all want to be able to pick up a phone in an emergency and call the police and have them come help us. And it's not fair to expect that level of help from them when we don't have any respect or, you know,
the number of shootings has just gotten beyond. I mean, I just can't understand it. Every day you pick up you look at the TV and there's something else going on.
It does seem that way. It does seem that way, and I do feel for law enforcement as they try and combat and move through this new problem that we are having. Eventually, I think everything, you know, comes in waves and it will slow down. But this is a difficult time for them moving through this particular incidents that we're having. And I think that it's important that they know that we do support them and that we will do our best to help them in this.
It goes along with the mindset now, disrespecting the flag, disrespecting all sorts of things, you know,
I think there is a lack of respect that has been built over the years in this country, and that does need to change. Lack of respect for our country, lack of respect for flag, military, law enforcement, laws in general. I think that we do need to move toward a more respectful behavior towards this.
And our history, if I may throw that in.
Oh, yes.
There is just, I mean, they're trying to rewrite history, and it is what it is. You learn from history.
You can't rewrite history. History is history.
It's it.
And you don't have to like what happened in history, but that doesn't change the fact that it happened. And it's important to look at history and learn from it and move forward and apply history to the future so that you know where it's going.
Yeah, I don't expect you to know this answer because but on the TV today there was a gentleman begging the Congress and the president to help Chicago out because this weekend apparently there was a record number of deaths and shootings, and I'm going to try to find out what Washington's role could be. I would think you'd have to be invited in by the governor at the very least, and for sure the mayor, who I doubt would be asking for any help.
If I recall, early on in his presidency, President Trump told them that he would employ National Guard in Chicago if it was necessary. Don't quote me on that because I seem to recall something about that, and maybe they are asking him to do that. I don't know. I haven't seen the news today. So.
No, because it was just one of the congressmen from that area had asked, because I mean I guess this weekend was the record of all time. People being shot, kids, you know, just kids walking on the street.
What has happened in Chicago is a perfect example of what happens when the law breaks down. And unfortunately, I know that it's not due to the Chicago Police Department failing to do their job.
Right.
They're just overwhelmed by as much problem as they're having. And it's very important to look at that and understand that we don't want that to occur in the rest of the country, and we definitely need to help Chicago. I know that, you know, Vermont, my purview would be Vermont, but it would also be national.
Oh, national, for sure.
And I would definitely support measures to end the violence in that particular area.
You have to feel safe. To have your kids go out and sit on the stoop and not worry about drive-by shootings. It's
tragic how much gang violence there is in this country. It really is, and it does need to be addressed.
Yeah, it's really bad. So what is your assessment of the current Congress? I say smiling. All the great work they have or haven't done. But
I believe that for the most part, Congress does try to make things better and get things done. There is so much infighting right now and partisanship and ill feeling for the other party at this point that I think that it is slowing progress down. But I am, as I said, a conservative Republican, and I can see where the Republicans are coming from. I can also see that Democrats don't agree with us. Obviously, they don't agree with us. But I think that it's important that we maintain dialogue between the two parties so that we can try and work through some of these issues. And at the end of the day, it is important that we support our country, save face in the world. You know, we have so much going on, especially in the media, where, you know, we complain so much about our own country. It's a poor bird that doesn't tend to its own nest, and it needs to be taken care of. It needs to be addressed, and there does need to be less embarrassing incidents of constant dissension that are on display for the world to see and feel like we are somehow divided. We are less divided than the media would have us believe.
I sincerely hope so, because
I believe that.
Do you believe that?
I do believe
when you've
that
been out and about, do you feel that there's I mean, I love this country, but 100%, and stand for the flag and all the stuff, and I even shed a few tears now and then when you know the Air Force flies over or something. But what are you hearing from people? I mean, because you're knocking on everybody's door, not just Republicans.
Definitely, especially in the process of getting the signatures and stuff to run. I've actually had Democrats say that they are happy that I'm running, just so that we would have a change and have a fresh perspective and things like that. So I really haven't encountered a whole lot of hateful rhetoric or anything like that. People seem to be happy to have, you know, like a local to go to Washington to speak their words and support them and try and help them. So I think that all in all, it's been positive.
Yeah, I just I think maybe it's Facebook, maybe it's even though your name is there, the face isn't there. You're not speaking face to face, and you feel a little bit more emboldened by Facebook, because I have seen some things on Facebook from people that I know. I'm like, what are you thinking? This is Vermont.
I think definitely that social media has a negative aspect in that way, that people can use it and feel like they won't be as vulnerable or caught doing it. I think that, you know, at some point they say, well, you know, they're not actually standing in front of somebody saying this, so it, you know, that's
you just
different.
Press send.
I think that most people prefer not to have that kind of hate-filled propaganda or whatever you want to say on their social media. Most people just use it for pictures of kids and puppies and kittens and have that cute little cat video, or watch a penguin slide into a pool or something like that.
Like I was just talking to the photographer, photographer tonight, just saying I love the ones where the weird combination of animals with like an elephant and a dog are best friends forever. And I get a big kick out of that.
Have you seen any where there's an elephant and a donkey?
Oh no, really?
No, I'm kidding.
Oh no, well,
for the two parties.
Oh, excellent. Sorry, my mind is a little slow. Got to shape up here.
I was making a joke.
That would be.
Sometimes people don't understand my humor.
We have to work on that. So, but then I was thinking, there are so many issues that are pending, and they don't seem to be coming to, you know, fruition. And I think if you get elected and you go to serve, you're going to be dealing with these things the day you walk in, obviously immigration. I'm just going to run the list, but then maybe we can go back and talk briefly about it. Immigration, and that means DACA, the wall, tariffs, gun control, which I'm sure is going to pop its little head up both here in Vermont and in Washington. Healthcare, which I can't even figure out where we are right now. National debt, and then the relationship with the EU, Iran, Israel, China, and it goes on and on. And we just talked a little bit about the term limits. And I also was thinking about the UN. I think that the UN, our participation in the UN and how much it costs us might be something that might come up about should we be involved in the UN still? Has it served its purpose? But anyway, let's just start with immigration and tell us what you're feeling about that.
The first thing I want to point out about the immigration troubles that we're having right now is that this is a fallout from the previous administration's policies. If you have strong immigration laws originally where people have to come through legally, go through the process, once they're in the country, you don't have these issues. They're on the path to citizenship, and that should be a foremost goal for somebody coming to this country. They should be working towards becoming a United States citizen, learning English, and being a productive member of society. What we're doing right now, especially on the southern border, is we are sorting through the people that were here without documentation. And that's a very big process. That is a lot of work to try and find who these people are, where they came from, vet them, make sure they're not a security threat to the United States or not a criminal threat to the United States. And with what is going on the southern border, in many cases, we have separated these children to protect the child. We don't know that these are their parents. They could be traffickers. And thus the DNA testing and so forth and things that you hear about. So it's important to understand that this kind of a process takes time, and they are sorting it out. I believe they only have maybe 500 or so kids still processing. I think they've processed close to 2,000 of them, as I understood it last. So definitely they are moving towards solving this problem. And at the end of the day, when you have stronger laws, it's kinder to everybody. You know, they're going to come here, they'll go through the process, become a citizen, and they won't have these troubles. They'll have the same rights as any citizen. Leading up to that point, you have to know who's in your country. You have to know who's coming across your border, what they're bringing across, and how they're going to affect your country in any way. So
they don't talk about the legal process of coming through. It sounds very complicated and expensive to me. And if they could address that, make it more focused and perhaps less expensive. I know they want people to come here that have some means of maintaining their lifestyle here.
They want to see that they have some kind of a marketable skill, so to speak.
But this may take years sometimes.
I don't know on the expense end what it would actually cost somebody coming in. I haven't actually looked into expenses. I do know that it is a time-consuming process, and perhaps that could be streamlined. I think that you could look at making it a quicker process for somebody. And of course there's amnesty programs and such if you know, people are in desperate need. But I think streamlining it would be good. You just can't make it unsafe. You have to be able to check and make sure and vet. And it's very hard to vet some of these immigrants from these countries. Some of these countries are very hard, especially when they're coming from a war-torn country. It's very hard to find documents and to say, oh, this person is this or that. You know, it's really a he said, she said at this point, and it's important that we work through that. Because
I think most people, contrary to what you read in the paper, because they always say we hate immigrants, but we don't like illegal immigrants. I think America has always welcomed legal immigrants. You know, come on.
Everybody in America has come from an immigrant at some point. I mean, unless you were 100% Native American, you have immigrant blood in you from somewhere. My family immigrated a long time ago to the United States. They did it legally. They came through Ellis Island, you know, as millions of others did. And I do think that you have to look at the fact that it is unfair to the immigrants that are coming through legally, going through the paperwork, working hard to have all of these people taking up our time and resources that could be put towards helping them. And I think that you do have to understand that that is the case.
You know what I just realized was you were talking, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the administration when they wanted to put restrictions on certain countries coming
Travel
here.
ban.
Travel ban. And no one has picked up on that. I mean, they're also focused on the issue with the kids, and that's seemed to be their current issue.
Well, it's a media frenzy at the moment.
Yes, but before that issue came up, it was all about these countries and how can you identify certain countries and say, no, you can't come in, but the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the administration.
I think that it's important to look at countries that are sponsors of terrorism.
Right.
And you can't say everybody from this country is a terrorist, but you can say that they have a high propensity for it, and we need to take extra precautions with them. And I think that that is all the administration was trying to do, and I think it was wise of the Supreme Court to rule in the interest of American security in that instance.
And it was the same list that the previous administration used, but no one mentions that either. But
no.
That's another story.
No.
So anyway, let's just move on with the, let me just ask about the wall, because that's, everybody's talking about the wall.
Everybody talks about the wall, for sure. The wall, while it probably wouldn't stop all illegal immigration, it will put a certain limit on who can come in. It makes it more difficult. It's like if you want to lock your front door. You know, if there's a thief going through the neighborhood and they feel a lock on the door, maybe they don't try that house. You know, they keep going. And I think that it also lets other countries know that we mean business. This is where we draw the line. And it gives our Border Patrol something that they can physically say, this is it. It's a very movable line down there right now. It's very fluid. And this is a solid statement that this is where, you know, for lack of a better term, the buck stops here. And we will work from this point forward. And there's a lot of talk about the cost of the wall. What we spend currently on trying to protect our southern border is most likely the wall would be a fraction of that. We spend a fortune trying to protect that border. And frankly, our northern border, nobody talks about immigration in Vermont. But this year alone, the amount of immigrants that have crossed over into the state of Vermont has doubled from last year. And I mean illegal immigrants, not legal immigrants. Illegal immigrants crossed into the state of Vermont. It has doubled since last year, and we're not even the full way through the year.
And we have, I don't think people realize this, we have 14 border crossings here in our little state.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, who has 14 crossings? But anyway.
We have quite a few.
I don't think,
we have quite a few, and like I said, nobody talks about the northern border, but it does have its own set of problems. We have definitely a fairly good relationship with Canada, but it's important to secure that border as well.
Yes, right. I agree. Of course, I love that Mexico never talks about their border. They have a wall on their southern border. I love it.
Yes.
We don't have it between them and us. So let's see, we gotta make sure we fit this all in here. Gun control, that's one of my favorites, late.
Yes.
So I don't think they've talked much about gun control in Washington, but I'm assuming they're going to be talking about that sooner or later. I believe
that there is always a concerted effort by the Democrats and the left to have gun control. I don't think that it ever really slows down. There's times that the media don't cover it as strongly, but at the end of the day, they're always in the process of trying to create gun control. Gun control, it sounds good when you speak it, but when you put it into practice, what it does is it deprives a law-abiding citizen of their right to defend themselves. Nobody that is going to commit a crime with a weapon has any moral or
they don't want to break
mental restriction on going and stealing a gun or buying a gun off the black market or finding a gun. Any of these things, a criminal will always get a gun if they want one. It's the law-abiding citizens that are being punished for crimes that they did not commit, and they are now unable to defend their home and family. The Second Amendment explicitly gives us the right to carry a gun, own a gun, protect ourselves. That is what the Second Amendment is for. And it is very important to understand that. And I've heard people say, well, the Second Amendment was so that people could carry a musket. You can't be seriously thinking that a musket is equal to any of the weapons that we have today and that it doesn't just carry over. Your enemies had a musket, you had a musket. Your enemies have a handgun, you have a handgun. You know, it equalizes. I actually had somebody say the other day that they had not ever really met a woman who is pro-Second Amendment. And as a woman, I think that it's very important to be able to own and carry a weapon for protection.
For sure.
Definitely. I mean, maybe even more so, just due to the fact that it's an equalizer, if you will. You know, I definitely think that it's important to be able to protect yourself no matter who you are.
I agree with you. And I am a Second Amendment person, so
yes.
there you go.
We need all that we can get.
Exactly. Little comments about the tariffs and what the president is doing now with tariffs and perhaps looking for equality in the tariffs with the other countries we deal with?
There is no doubt that what was going on with the other countries and was unfair to the United States in, as far as the import-export went. And the president is simply trying to balance that out. The other countries are fighting that because it was in their best interest before, which really proves his point. Anytime that there's a shift like this or a change, it's an uncomfortable time. It's difficult and it takes time to get there. But I do believe that it's moving in a positive direction and that at the end we will see a better economy and a better fair trade with the rest of the world. America does need to be a national player as far as trade and policy goes. We do need to have a national presence. I'm not going to say that we don't, because we do. We do have to take care of America in order to have that type of power in the world. And when you have that kind of unbalance in the trade, we were suffering. The American worker was suffering, the American consumer is suffering. So it's important for us to balance that out. And yes, it is difficult at this time, but it will get better.
I agree with you. I think it's just going to take some time because we are always on it's not a balance. It's we're down here somewhere.
For a long time.
Yes, exactly. And that's just, I'll skip over to the UN quickly. We pay those folks a whole lot of money.
Yes.
And I don't know, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, why? Why are we there? What are they doing for us? Because they vote against us most of the time, and they throw in Israel here. They vote against Israel every chance they get, and I'm wondering why we're still there.
As I said, it's because
and I
America.
May be wrong, so.
Well, no, you're not necessarily wrong. I think, as I said before, America needs to be a player on the national stage, and having a presence at the UN is part of that. We do give them a lot of money, and they don't generally help us with a lot. I mean, as far as like our war effort and stuff like that, very few of the UN countries actually came to help us after 9/11. Very few. Some did, and we're friends with them, we're allies with them, but very few of them actually did. And I think that the president has his point clearly made about the UN when he talks about the fact that they need to be stepping up for their share of the financial burden. And I think that nobody really wanted to hear that at the UN table, but at the end of the meeting, I think everybody understood where he was coming from, and that we can't continue to just carry the world, basically. And I don't think that we want to give up our UN's, position or seat. But I do think that we need to rework the financial aspect and how they assist us. And
they have to start to support us.
Yes, they don't support us. They do, and especially with President Trump, like with climate change and stuff like that. They're very harsh on that with him. But you do have to realize that, not to get off the UN, but into climate change, you do have to realize that the climate change agreement that he pulled out of would have provided such a small level of change over the course of 50-some years that the price tag didn't equal the product. And you can have all of these measures put in place to take care of the economy without that price tag.
I agree with you.
So I think that...
Love Nikki Haley.
She does a wonderful job.
Oh my God.
She really does.
I saw her, I was in Arizona at a meeting with the transportation people when I was Secretary of Transportation, and they had Nikki Haley come in as a guest speaker. Whoa, she was powerful. Just being there, she was amazing. So when she
was an excellent pick.
Yeah, she was great, because when she delivers the message, you believe it. She knows. She's got a country behind her when she's talking.
She is very good at putting the point across, very clear, very concise, and that's something I try to do, so I really respect that.
Yeah, she is amazing. So the next thing on our list, and I'm embarrassed to say I have absolutely no idea where this country is in healthcare at the moment. I don't even know what are we doing
I think
anything?
that most people don't know where we are in healthcare, and we're still in the transition between Obamacare and where we're going to go.
Right.
That's the main thing. Obamacare epically was a failure.
Right, yes,
The government cannot hand healthcare to the entire population and maintain fiscal viability.
Right.
At the end of the day, anytime the government is going to give you anything, the taxpayer is paying for it. The government is not an independently the government is not independently wealthy.
Right.
Their money comes from the taxpayer. So at the end of the day, the taxpayer was still paying for health insurance. We just simply took out free market insurance, or the middleman, however you want to say it, which eliminated competition, raising rates, et cetera, et cetera. Healthcare comes down to the economy as well. I'm not against Medicaid. I think that Medicaid is an important program for people that need it in an emergency that comes to their aid. I think that that's important. But the government cannot do that for everyone and still have money to be able to help those that are in desperate need right away. So we do need to work towards independent health insurance. Nobody gets turned down for care, whether they have health insurance or not. They cannot turn you away. So it's not like if you don't have this, you can't get medical treatment. You do need to work towards independent insurance, and it comes down to assisting the economy in growing and strengthening so that people can make a wage that supports buying health insurance. I know millions of people don't have that at this point. They don't have a wage where they can hand out. And the cost of insurance and medical prescriptions and so forth is truthfully extremely high. And that, I think, could be looked into to see how that could be lowered to be more affordable for the consumer.
Is there a group working on this in Congress right now? I mean, is there a healthcare commission?
I don't know how active they are on this particular
subject. It just fell off the radar
now.
All of a sudden. And
well,
nothing's changed, it's just getting worse.
It's not the pet subject of the week for the meeting.
Exactly.
I'm sure that there is some kind of a committee working on it. We just don't hear about it much.
Because we're certainly working on it here in Vermont. Pretty hard with the Green Mountain Care Board and a few other things. But all of a sudden it just stops to be an issue.
Well, it's important for the state of Vermont to realize that in 2011 they enacted single-payer health care coverage, and by 2014 they had to pull it. It wasn't fiscally viable. And that was the case with the whole country. So I'm sure that there is a health care committee. We just don't hear much about it these days.
I wish they would start covering it. I should get them the press on that.
Yes.
So I can't imagine at this point whether national debt is in, I think it's trillions and trillions at the moment, and nobody talks about streamlining and, I don't know, saving money just for something to do. I mean, I would think in the national government there's a few things that could be streamlined and save some money.
I think that we do spend a fortune on some things that need to be looked at. Okay. I'm not saying that they need to be removed, but I am saying that they need to be looked at. Yes, things such as state assistance or federal assistance or welfare, however you want to put it, needs to be looked at to see that the constituents are moving towards employment. The goal of assistance should be to move the individual towards employment. And I realize, there's young children involved and things like that, but you do have to help people become independent. And ultimately, I think that people want to be independent. I don't think that people really would like to continue to get an assistance check when they could make more at a job and have a better quality life.
And feel proud about what they're doing.
And be proud about it and understand that they are supporting their family. You also have to look at whether these individuals are on narcotics. You have to look at if the system's being abused in some way. All of these things cost the government money that could be going towards taking care of the people that genuinely need it. And everybody should be concerned that they are not that people are misusing the system.
Right.
Everybody should be concerned about that, because at the end of the day, it takes away, if you need it someday, it takes away the money that you would have.
Right.
So.
Yep. I think they always say hand up, not hand out. And
yes,
I like
absolutely.
that, because I think people need to feel that they've accomplished something, not that.
I know personally, I like to know that I am accomplishing something,
Good.
and
Makes you feel good.
to stand on my own 2 feet and
Yeah.
to do it. I mean, personally, I feel that way. So I'm sure millions of people do, and I think that it also is good for the children. You know, that they don't grow up completely on the state dole.
Right,
You know, that
right.
they understand that, you know, they will grow up. They have the opportunity to get a good job and to better their lives and to come out of poverty. I think all of that's important. As far as spending goes, I do not think that we need to cut back on defense spending.
No.
We need to protect our country,
Right.
and cutting back on defense spending is just counterproductive.
Yeah. And now with new technology, these drone things.
Oh, yes.
I know there was something bad happened the other day with a drone trying to.
Venezuela.
Yeah,
yes.
exactly. I mean, what is going on? Now you have to look
Yeah.
at the sky right up above your head. But anyway, and on the international front, a lot of discussion about how we're viewed in Europe these days, and Iran and Israel, and what do you think our position should be out there with, I mean, with China, and I mean, it's just everywhere you look, we're surrounded.
We definitely are. I think it's also a point to make that millions of people are still trying to get into the United States.
Right.
So our popularity is not at an all-time low where nobody wants to come here. We're still considered a wonderful country, and people still want to come to. It is true. And I think that politically, some of these countries differ with us, definitely. But the people themselves, I think, understand where we're coming from. And you also need to look at places like Europe that have a huge influx of refugees right now.
They've got their hands full.
And they have troubles from this that need to be addressed, that they need to take care of. And ultimately, people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones if you
some of their glass houses are pretty scary.
Yes, all of these countries are, have an opinion on how America should be running America, how America should be on the world scene, how America should be handling our problems, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody has their own set of problems that need to be addressed.
Right.
Now, it's okay if you want to give a suggestion and so forth, but at the end of the day, it is our country and we will handle it the way we want to. As far as China and places like that go, they're just upset about trade and the trade changes, and that will balance out. China wants to continue to have a working relationship with America, and I'm sure that America wants to have a
I don't think they're going to do anything foolish to
I don't believe so. I think that they're a little mad at this point, but things will settle down. North Korea, I think that we are moving in a better direction with North Korea. I mean, we have the remains of some of these.
Very few people covered that. I mean, that was the most dramatic thing.
It was.
To have, and some of the artifacts that came back with the remains. And very few stations covered it. You didn't see
Very
anything.
few covered it, and that's a shame because these are American heroes who actually died for their country. And it is a shame that there was not more media coverage to the fact that they are finally home where they belong in their country that they died for. And I think that it was a beautiful gesture by Kim Jong-un to actually make good on that and to send these American soldiers home. And nobody gives the president credit for that. But he is the only president since the Korean War that has received any kind of war remains back. And he worked very hard on that. And I think that we should all be very proud and thankful to him for taking care of our militaries in that way.
Yeah, I was watching the service, and it was beautiful. Just taking them off.
Actually, I have a video on my Facebook page of it.
Oh, really?
It's a sobering moment when you see that. It really is, and
and gives the families finally.
It's important for the families to have that closure and to feel, to know that their loved one is back home where they belong, and that's very important.
It's great.
So I think that we're moving in a positive direction with North Korea. I don't think that the president, completely trusts Kim Jong-un. I don't think that Kim Jong-un completely trusts Donald Trump, although he probably could. But at the end of the day, I think that we've had more positive conversation with them than we've ever had before, and that's a step in the right direction, regardless of what happens now.
Yeah, exactly. So just to change the subject a little bit, I was asking, what are your special skills? My big thing is, what committee assignment would you be put on? And have you thought about that at all? Because that's a big deal.
Well, if I was to join a committee, probably one of my favorites would be agriculture.
Well, of course.
And after that, I would probably look into something to do with security. I'm very conscious about the security and stuff like that. That's always kind of been a fascination for me. 9/11, you know, everybody, there isn't anybody who wasn't affected by 9/11, and I was, and I truly feel that, you know, over the course of these years, we have worked very hard to keep our country safe, and to be a part of that would be an honor.
That's great.
Truthfully, it would be.
I did not lose a friend. I had a little unusual experience. A friend of mine was in the building next door, and they got inundated with breathing and all kinds of materials came in. And she died a year later, but they directly related it to that. So I mean, people are sick and die years later, and I don't think we even know that number now.
I don't think we know a complete number on it. I do know that, unfortunately, for years now, there have been side effects from what they breathe, especially with the fire department and the first responders, but even with citizens who just breathe. The air in New York was toxic.
All the plastics and toxic.
Yeah, the air was toxic. I think they said for over a year.
Yeah.
It was a horrible amount of debris that was put into the air. And I don't think that we do have a figure on how that affected this citizens and society, but I do know that there have been many deaths related to it since then, which ultimately leads back to adding to the death toll of that day. And
so dramatic.
You know, it is
horrible. Well, that would be good to get on ag, because it's certainly in this state. We had several shows recently on ag and the condition of our farms here,
it's a sad state.
But although I found interesting, the numbers have gone down, but they've become so efficient that the actual production of milk has pretty much has stayed level, even though the numbers have gone down because they've become more efficient. But it's all costly, and that's a problem for the farmers.
It's very costly. When you think back on agriculture 100 years ago or something like that, cattle ate grass or hay, they produced a limited amount of milk, and you know, everybody was making their living off this farm. As time went on, they found ways to improve the milk production and so forth, etc. It is a problem, though, that so many farms and this much farmland is being taken out of agriculture. It's very hard to reclaim land back for agriculture once it has been urbanized.
Right.
And I think that nobody is really considering this, that once land is out of the agricultural game, as it were, it's pretty much gone. They're not making any more land. It's very important to maintain the farms that we have.
That's great. That's what you're thinking.
True. It is true. It's very important to maintain the land that we have, to keep it in production. The United States needs to have its own food reliability. Once another country controls your food and you are importing all of your food, that you are in a vulnerable position. I'm not saying that that would ever come up. I'm saying it could come up. And it is necessary to understand that if we can produce the food to feed our own country, that would be our ultimate goal. And the population keeps growing, you know, the demand is higher, and yet agriculture is declining. There's something wrong in this equation. And part of it is the financial burden that is on agriculture currently. A lot of it is that the younger generation doesn't want to take over the farm. But in many instances, it is a lot of work. But in many instances, the younger generation does want to take on the farm and simply can't afford it. Or a younger generation or a younger person wants to buy a farm. And it's nearly impossible for somebody to get started in farming now if you don't inherit.
Well, because the only thing I think about land is when they want to turn to organic, it takes years to get that farmland to where you can say you have organic products. It's quite a process to be labeled organic. So if you lose the land altogether, to even get to be farmable.
Oh, it would be,
it must be
once, let's say, if
the nutrients are out of the ground.
If a
It's
forest
gone.
grows up on farmland, it takes years and years to get it back to a productive field for
Right.
hay or for crops. Once you have poured concrete and all of that, nobody is going to go in and tear these buildings down and spend years
Right,
repairing the ground underneath and trying to
Right.
reclaim it for farming. It's just not going to happen. And it's very important for us to understand
That's
that we
great.
need to protect the farmland that we have.
That's great. I'm right with you.
No, thank
So when you're out, what is your overall message to your constituents, which would be the citizens of Vermont?
My overall message to the citizens of Vermont is that I am the person that understands what they go through day to day. I am living what they live day to day. I work full time. I have, my property taxes at an extreme high. I mean, I
Yes.
understand all of these
Yes.
things. I understand the need and the want to, own a firearm and to go hunting. I understand that the economy is less than optimal. We have the young generation in the state. Vermont, I believe, is the second oldest state in the nation.
Yes,
and the
we
younger
are.
generation is fleeing the state for better opportunity. And that's a shame. We have a beautiful state. And a state needs to have a young working generation
Right.
to continue to have income and to support itself and to maintain fiscal viability. So it's very important for us to address these issues, look at what we could do to bring business to the state, to keep the young people, to provide the opportunity that's so important. We have a very harsh climate. So if we don't have some type of business and agriculture and tourism and all of these things
Right.
correlated, we don't have a lot of natural resource to make money on. We do need to kind of import
Right.
it, as it were. And it's important for us to strengthen the economy. It's important for us to fight for agriculture and fight for farming. And farming is tied to our tourism base as well. People come to the state of Vermont, they expect to see
Right.
dairy farms.
Right.
And it will hurt us if they don't. For that reason, I'm kind of getting off the beaten
No,
track.
that's
I'm
quite all
not
right.
for wind and solar power because it takes away from land values. It does not provide steady and ongoing jobs
Right.
for many people. The effects of which have not really been understood or studied over a long-term period to continually keep putting it in. I'm talking health effects, economic effects, environmental effects. We don't really know yet. And my mother always used to say, you don't want to be the first one to try anything.
Exactly.
And be,
We
you know,
always seem to
have
do
your
that
hand
in
up,
Vermont.
me, just sign me up for
Right.
anything. It's important to understand that every cause has an effect. We
Right.
just don't know what it is yet.
Right.
So for that reason, all of that's important to me. It's very important to me that we maintain the Constitution. Once you allow a constitutional right to be picked at or eroded away, it's very hard to stop that from continuing. Once one is gone or once one has been somewhat changed, all
Right.
of them are now in danger. And a lot of good men and women over the years have died to protect our freedoms. And it is very important that we don't just sign them away because we don't fully understand the implications of
Right.
that. You know, it's important that we are consciously aware of what we are doing and studying how it will affect the future generations. You know, just because something is a hot topic today doesn't mean that it's a topic that we need to address on such a major scale that it changes our future. We need to address it as what it is and not a broad spectrum change to the entire
Right.
Constitution. You know, all of those things are important. I am a Christian, so I am for pro-life. I'm not for abortion. I think that
Right.
adoption is a reasonable solution to women who wish to or give up a child or
Right.
can't raise the child for some
Right.
reason. Medically, there are reasons why this is not possible in some cases, but we have fascinating modern medical technology that I think those instances are rare. And there have always been medical instances where these things took apart or, were a problem. But as far as just aborting because you don't want to raise
Right.
this child. There are millions of people that can't have children that would love to adopt a child. And I think that it's important to note that if this child was even 1 minute old and breathing, it would be considered murder to kill it.
Right.
So how is it different?
Right.
You know, I know that seems like an extreme view, but it's the way I feel. And I think that it's important to support Christianity in the country. If you don't have Christian values, which we are based upon, our country does not have the structure that we have built the great country that it is upon. And you can't expect to have all of these wonderful things when you take out the root of what caused it, you know. So that's important. I will fight for Christianity to remain in government and remain in school. Church and state separate is a whole different thing. I'm talking about the values that Christianity imparts. And we, Christians in general, are very inclusive of others, are very charitable, and, you know, we don't persecute people for not being what we are. I'm not saying that every Christian is perfect or that in every instance, you know, this was the case. In general, we are a very tolerant religion. So it's important to maintain Christian values in this country, so I support that.
That's great. There's a group of women who, men and women who really believe wholeheartedly in the Constitution. And in Franklin County in St. Albans, once a year, I don't know whether it's 4th of July or they read the Constitution from beginning to.
Heard that.
Have you ever?
I've never been to it personally, but I have heard. I do read the Constitution.
Yes, and they hand out a little booklet, which I usually have with me, and I don't. It was very moving. I went because I know one of the women who leads the event every year. So I said, okay, I'll go. And I just didn't know what to expect, and I stood there, and they had a long line of people, and you could just get into line and read the next section, and people that were reading were getting emotional. It was just a wonderful event.
It's a fascinating document, and when you consider that this document was written when people, you know, were writing it with a quill and ink, and you know, we had absolutely none of the modern technology that we now have. That they sat down and they got all of these states together, which took a great deal of time to gather everybody together and to get the word out. And we're able to put into writing a document to govern this country that is still so relevant to this day. It's truly an inspired piece of work, and it's truly a fascinating read. I mean, definitely.
Well, I mean, I've read it, but when I heard it read to me.
Yes, the emotion is
in
there more.
In this courtyard, I mean, we were outside, and they had a podium, and just the whole thing, you really understood it and believed it, and all the way home I'm going, whoa. And just for them to have the foresight to make it a living document that goes on forever.
It definitely is.
Great.
But it's timeless principles. You know, it's about freedom, it's about personal rights, it's about what's right and wrong, and anything that was somewhat, you know, iffy here or there, it has been amended over the time. You know, we definitely have a completed. I mean, you know, prohibition happened, but they repealed all of that.
I think the freedom of speech thing needs to be.
Freedom
I'm sorry. I think they've taken that and just.
When you talk about the First Amendment of freedom of speech, it does state peaceful demonstration.
Oh, I don't think people have read that part.
No, it does state that you peacefully gather. If you're not peacefully gathering, you're heading more towards revolution or uprising or something, or rioting or something like that. It's very important to understand that you can put your point across without becoming violent. Because in most cases,
when I watch these people, I completely turn off. So if they think they're making a point, they're not. I mean, if they go beyond peaceful, if they're peaceful, I listen. But beyond that, I just turn right off and go forget it.
I think that they actually hurt their cause by becoming violent and shouting and screaming, because nobody really wants to see that. You know, I think that they are actually hurting their opinion by doing what they're doing, and it's always important to maintain composure and be calm and speak intelligently on a subject. It makes a better point than just shouting and screaming and holding a sign in the street. Yes.
Anyway, we have 4 minutes left, and I would love you to cover anything that we haven't touched upon for you to talk to the
Okay.
audience? And
Well, the primary is 8 days from now.
right.
I do have a primary challenger, but I am 100% the candidate to go after Peter Welsh for
Right.
his seat. I don't back down. I fight pretty hard. I do maintain, you know, a level of civility about it, but I do fight pretty hard. And I want to be the voice of Vermont. I want to be the true voice. I want to be the young people's voice, the women's voice, the men's voice. I'm in a unique position to be Vermont's voice to Washington.
Are you having any debates with Peter? Has he agreed to any, or?
Generally, those take place after the primary.
Oh, okay, of course,
I
right.
did have a forum where it wasn't a debate, it was a forum
Yeah.
with the other two gentlemen running for
Oh, I
his
see,
seat from
right.
the Democratic
Right.
side. But all in all, those generally take place later.
That's right.
But I would like to encourage people that if they agree with what I'm saying, even if they
Right.
agree with part of what I'm saying, that they should vote for me on August 14th. I will be a great representative for the state of Vermont.
Great.
I
Great.
definitely
It
will
was a pleasure
be.
meeting you.
Well, I thank
Good
you for
luck.
having me. Thank you
Good
so
luck.
much.
Well, I really want these shows that people don't get to meet the candidates like
No.
this.
And it's a big state.
Yeah,
And we
it
turn,
is. It
it's a
is.
big state when you are the one representative for it, and you
Exactly.
travel everywhere.
A lot of parades.
And I'm from the Northeast Kingdom, so it's a lot of
Yeah,
driving.
exactly. Well, thank you for doing this.
Thank
I
you.
really admire you for
Oh,
taking
thank you very
this
much.
on.
I appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week, and in the meantime, keep listening beyond the sound bites.